Can everyone hear me? All right, this calls to order this special meeting for May 27th, 2025 of the Yountville Zoning and Design Review Board. Can we have a roll call?
Members Cook,
Here.
Henthorn,
Here.
Toposky,
Here.
Vice Chair Zagorczyk,
Here.
and Chair Miller.
Here. Would you all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Public comment for matters not listed on the agenda. I assume everyone's here for this one subject. All right. The public hearing. Consider resolution number 25026. Provide direction and make recommendation to the town council regarding the preliminary and final master development plan, tentative parcel map, use permit, state density bonus waivers, design review, tree removal permit, and master sign plan for the Humboldt mixed-use project at 2010 and 2012 Humboldt Street, and the recommendation of the town to the town council that they find the project exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to CEQA guidelines, section 15332. All right, staff.
Thank you, Chair Miller and ZDRB. We'll be turning it over to Carrie Svanstrom, a contract planner for the town, who will be presenting this item.
Great.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ZDRB Chair and members. Happy to be joining you today. Let me get my slideshow up. Okay, so most of you are familiar with this site. This is a vacant lot that consists of two parcels currently at Humboldt and Jefferson Streets, zoned residential scale commercial. We did receive a new application in February of 25, which changed the project to include 5 dwelling units. The new entitlements that are required for the project include inclusionary housing requirements. Any project 5 units or larger is subject to the town's inclusionary housing requirements. In addition, the application also requested 4 density bonus waivers, which I'll review in turn. The other entitlements needed are master development plan, the tentative parcel map to create 3 condos, major design review, a use permit, actually for 2 things, one for a mixed-use building and for owner occupancy of one of the dwelling units. There is a master sign plan and tree permit, removal permit, as well as CEQA, California Environmental Quality Act review, which would be an exemption for infill development. As most of you may recall, these parcels were included in the May 2019 adopted general plan and identified as change areas, changing them from formerly Old Town Historic Residential and recommending that these be changed to residential scale commercial. There are specific requirements for that lot in both the general plan and the rezoning, which was done in 2020. So again, this parcel has been zoned residential scale commercial since 2020. It does prohibit certain commercial uses that are sort of larger impacts, like tasting rooms or restaurants. It requires a minimum of 2 second-story residential units, and also a minimum lot size, which in essence requires the merger of the parcel, which is being proposed with the project. The new project still includes a two-story mixed-use development. The retail space is still approximately 2,300 square feet, comprising of 2 spaces on the first floor and 5 residential units, 3 on the second floor above the retail spaces. That includes 2 one-bedroom condos and 1 studio. There's also 1 studio on the northeast side of the main part of the structure and 1 two-story studio on the east side of the site. The project is proposing 8 parking spaces at this point, 2 S garages and 6 shared spaces shared between the residential and the commercial uses. Again, this set of entitlements does require both a ZDRB recommendation and Town Council for final decision. A little bit about the project history. There was a prior application that was submitted in 2023, and it was heard by the ZDRB after several staff reviews in both June of 2024 as well as January of this year. After that January hearing, the applicant again submitted a new application with a change to the project scope. On the side of the slide, you can see the 2 new residential units that are part of this new application. The one is backed by sort of the car diagram north of the condo garage, and so there was a parking space in the prior application. This is now an ADA adaptable residential unit, apartment 1, and east of the porte cochere, the covered entry to the parking, there is a 2-story residential identified as apartment 2. Again, the project is subject to the town's inclusionary ordinance, which requires the project provide a minimum of 15% of the units as affordable, which equals 1 deed restricted affordable unit. The project also qualifies for review under the Housing Accountability Act as a project that has two-thirds residential as part of the project. It does also qualify for density bonus waivers. And I'm going to hand off to Mackenzie Anderson, our town attorney, or assistant town attorney, to give a little background on the legal framework.
Sure, thank you, Carrie. So as she already touched upon, this new project, because it contains 2 or more dwelling units and at least 2/3 of the square footage is designated for residential use, it is subject to the Housing Accountability Act. This act, as you all are aware of by now, restricts the town's ability to deny certain development projects. The act permits a local agency to apply objective standards. The statute defines objective to mean involving no personal or subjective judgment and being uniformly verifiable by reference to an external and uniform benchmark that's available and knowable by the applicant and the public official at the time it was submitted. So when a housing development project complies with applicable objective standards, then the town can only disapprove of the project or impose a condition that would lower its density if it finds that the project would have a specific adverse impact on health or safety that cannot otherwise be satisfactorily mitigated or avoided. And we will get into the details and answer any questions about how this applies here as that arises, but I think we can move to the next slide. So this project is also subject to the state density bonus law because it contains 5 units, one of which is being deed restricted affordable for low-income households making between 50 to 80% of the area median income. The density bonus law allows a developer to add an increased number of units beyond what is typically allowed by the zoning code based on the percentage of affordable units included in their development. They are also entitled to at least 1 concession and unlimited waivers of any standards that would physically preclude construction of the development at the density proposed. And that is also measured on a sliding scale based on the percentage of units they designate affordable. And it also imposes other limits on the number of parking spaces that can be required per each residential unit. And standards that are waived under the density bonus law need to be treated as met and be considered consistent under the Housing Accountability Act as well. So where a waiver is granted, we will treat that as consistent with an objective standard. Next slide, please. All right, so the standard for waivers, it's my understanding, I believe staff's understanding, that there are no concessions currently being requested. We are relying solely on the waiver standard for this project. Subsection E of the density bonus law requires that a waiver be approved unless you can make a written finding based on substantial evidence in the record that the waiver would result in a specific adverse impact upon public health and safety for which there's no feasible method to satisfactorily mitigate or avoid that impact. Or it would have a specific adverse impact on any real property that's listed in the California Register of Historical Resources, or it would be contrary to state or federal law. So similar to the HAA standard, but they work in tandem, and we can get into the intricacies of how those work together when we discuss later.
Mackenzie, sorry for the interruption. My sources tell me the YouTube channel isn't working. Just figured I would raise an IT flag. There's some people waiting.
We are working on that
Okay,
issue.
good.
Thank you for
Okay.
that. So I
Okay.
will update you when we have a resolution.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Sorry for the interruption.
I think that may be it for my slides, if Carrie can, yeah.
Thank you, Mackenzie. So I'll get to the density bonus waivers in just a moment, but again, I did want to go over the town's inclusionary housing requirements, which all projects in the town with 5 or more dwelling units, 5 or new dwelling units, must provide at least 15% of the new units as deed restricted. And so I often get the question, what does deed restricted mean? That means affordable to low-income households, which is defined as 50 to 80% of the Napa area median income, which equates in 2024, we haven't received the 25 adjustments yet, but for 24, was between $51,000 and $82,000 for a single person household. It raises if it's 2 or 3 person households. We've included the singles since the proposed unit is the apartment 1, ADA adaptable, the 479 square foot studio, and most likely a studio might be a 1 person. So that equates for you. Inclusionary housing, the town does have an agreement with the city of Napa to do the monitoring for this. They are subject to all the fair housing regulations in terms of tenants, annual monitoring by the town, and they are also deed restricted to that affordability level for 55 years. Again, both the 5 units and the inclusionary housing, affordable housing as part of the project does enable the applicant to request density bonus waivers. And they are requesting 4 waivers. They're not requesting any density bonus units. The allowed density for the site is between 2 and 16 units. They're proposing 5, so they're well within that, and not proposing, like I said, above and beyond 16. And they're not, as far as we're aware, relying on concessions. These are all waiver requests, so waivers of development standards. And I will go through these each in turn. Some of these were in the prior application requested as master plan deviations, so you may be a little familiar with the requests, but there have been some modifications. Density bonus waiver 1 is to the front setback on Jefferson Street. They are requesting a 10-foot setback instead of 15 feet. And so that is to allow them to build both the amount of retail space to support the rents, as well as obviously the first floor supports the second floor, which is all residential units. And if they did need to switch this back, they have noted they would lose 1 full bay of parking due to the town standards and the requirements for a usable driveway access and 2 bays of parking on a double loaded corridor. The frontage itself has a 17-foot depth between the face of the building and the curb, which is adequate for the required sidewalk, a series of street planting trees. They're proposing scarlet oaks for those, as well as planting strips. The two white areas you see are mechanical vaults, and that is one of the other constraints on the setback, but it does allow the curb to be forward of that and be perceived as a 15 or 17-foot setback to the building.
If I could just quickly provide an update, the stream is now live, and any part of the meeting that was missed will be available to view after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. The second density bonus waiver is the FAR waiver, and that would allow an FAR of 0.61 instead of 0.4. And so what that 0.4 breaks down to in the town standards are the town allows 0.25 FAR for retail. They are proposing 0.24 for retail, so the retail is conforming. And then the town codes allows an additional 0.15 FAR for residential. The residential is requesting 0.37, where the code is 0.15, and so that is the density bonus waiver. It is completely related to the residential provision, obviously, since that is the portion of the FAR that exceeds the standard. And so that equates to a 0.22 FAR in excess of what's allowed, or about 2,400 square feet. The third waiver that's being requested is for parking. Under the state density bonus law, there are 13 spaces required, 5 for the residential and 8 spaces for the retail uses. They are proposing to have 8 spaces in total. 6 of those spaces would be for the 3 studio residential spaces and for the retail. And those are spaces 1 through 6 on the diagram on the screen. And so the uncovered parking, and then the covered van accessible parking, which would be, again, those would be shared between the residential and the retail. They are also proposing 2 spaces in garages, 1 space each for each of the 1-bedroom condo units. Those include some storage bays in front that sort of mirrors the interior commercial storage for bicycles or what have you in those. The shared parking will require a recorded agreement on the property title. This is being used. The shared parking also allows them to meet the requirement for the 88 parking for building code, and so that does need to persist through time. One note, although this was discretionary in the general plan and not objective, the general plan does encourage that shared parking should be looked at for complementary uses, and usually uses such as retail or office, which has daytime hours, and residential, where residents are often leaving to commute to a job and then coming back after work, are considered complementary, where the demand is at different times of day. The general hours of the retail, I believe, are 10 to 5 or 10 to 6. So. And then the final density bonus waiver is to the top story floor area limit. The town does limit the top story to the overall building square footage at 40%. The project is requesting that be 43%, which is 234 square feet over what the limit would otherwise be. And again, other than a 299 square foot for the peaked roof 2-story space at the retail entry, all of the top story square footage is related to the residential. The areas that are included in that are the sort of the upper floor plan in the corner on the screen with the grayed out. The sort of more lighter color are the courtyards and uncovered entryways, which are not included in FAR. So that is the presentation on the density bonus waivers. I'll go through the other entitlements required. One is the master development plan, and that is the town's requirement for all new development proposals in this zone and many other zones. The criteria for that is that it be consistent with the objective general plan standards, zoning ordinance, and town codes, consistent with the objective design review and use permit requirements, and overall the project creates an environment of sustained desirability and stability. I realize that is a little bit subjective, but those the evaluation of those criteria are based on those objective standards that are in the general plan, zoning ordinance, and town codes, including the objective design review and use permit requirements. The tentative parcel map, they are proposing obviously to merge the two parcels as part of this project as required by the town. And then create a parcel map, which would create 3 condominiums on the parcel. Condo 1 and 2, or A and B in this diagram, would be the 2 one-bedroom residential units plus the garages, and all of the other rental studio units, the studio residential units, the parking area, and the retail would all be under the same ownership as a condo 3. And there would be open space and common area, obviously, between these. The Public Works, John Farron, city engineer, has included conditions of approval to make sure that there's the requirements for the final map, as well as common area maintenance and other things like that that would be required. The use permit, again, 2 use permits are required. The mixed use project in the RSC zoning district does require a use permit to make sure the intensity is appropriate for the area, intensity of the commercial. And the other criteria are consistent with the town's economic goals, no negative health and safety impacts, and the ability to serve the development. Those have been met in staff's analysis of the project. The intensity of the commercial, again, is 2 retail spaces, the hunter-gatherer retail for the main space, and a flower shop for the second space. These could be any retail in the future, should that change, but they would still be restricted to retail as part of the use permit. The owner occupancy of one of the one-bedroom dwelling units is also being requested, which requires a use permit. There will be 4 rental units that are retained in the project. And so that does address the concerns that the reason the use permit for owner occupancy was required in the general plan and in the zoning ordinance was to make sure the residential space was not being used for retail purposes, for office space or other storage, and to make sure that the 2 single-family housing opportunities that were lost when the parcel was rezoned, that there were still a minimum of 2 rental opportunities for rental opportunities within the town for residential. In terms of design review, the project is only subject to the objective standards that are allowed under the HAA, as Mackenzie had noted, and those are included in the staff report. They are fairly limited. The town does meet all of the objective design standards, so the development standards of the 30-foot height and some of the other the setbacks other than the density bonus waivers, open space requirements, etc. for the housing units are all met. The new design elements from the last former application include the hip roof at the the hunter-gatherer entry still has the gable roof, but the flat roofs that were just parapets before, now they have introduced a hip roof for those. And there is also a 2-story element on the eastern side. So on the bottom element on the screen, you can see the hip roofs on above the flower shop, and in the distance on the north side. And then on the east side, this is the 2-story residential unit where the porte cochere and a wall fence screening the parking was previously. And then these are the north elevations. On the north side, facing the adjoining shared driveway, is sort of the entry to the apartment 1. They do have a private entry courtyard, which is partially covered, and then the entry to that. And then in the distance, you can see the so there'd be property line privacy fence from the adjoining neighbors, but then there's also a enclosed private open space area for the 2-story studio apartment as well. And then on the east elevation, noticeable changes are just the windows on the first floor for the residential unit there. The rest of the elevation, other than the hip roof, so the courtyards for the 1 bedrooms, the courtyards for the studio, and the formation of the retail space are the same as the former application. Additionally, the design for the materials and colors, it's still proposed as a smooth stucco siding with the wood frame windows. Colors are proposed to be white for a field, and then the black or the pitch black, as noted below, for the trim. The windows are wood windows. They would be painted that trim color, and inset display windows similar to what's at Wheatwood. The first floor would have fabric awnings, and the second would have metal awnings and window boxes. I believe I did get a question about who would be maintaining the flowers and the window boxes. And my understanding is that would all be maintained by the retail, particularly most likely the flower shop, in terms of making sure that all of those are maintained. And then, as noted, the privacy fence around the inside property lines would be horizontal steel panel at 6 feet. The tree removal entitlement, there is one regulated tree. It is a 24-inch diameter California walnut in the northwest corner. It is in poor condition and does require replacement of 24-inch diameter equivalent, which is included in the conditions of approval. And then additionally, the street trees, which are not regulated trees, would be removed. Most of those are pear trees and 2 small coast live oaks, and those would be replaced by the proposed landscaping. And this is the proposed replacement trees. The scarlet oaks, which are the red tree on the screen, would be on the Jefferson Street side. The crepe myrtles would be on the interior and on the Humboldt Street side, I believe. And then the niche that they have created would have a magnolia tree. The signage, they are applying for a master sign permit. The minimal signage is proposed about 15 square feet between the 2 signs, where 63 square feet is allowed. Then those would be either just above for the hunter-gatherer, the window frame detail, or on the window frame detail as noted on the flower shop, the sign 2. For CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, the project does qualify for an infill exemption. which a project that's less than 5 acres within the city limits without habitat for endangered species or significant effects from traffic, noise, air, or water quality, and can be served by public utilities and consistent with the general plan, qualifies for. And so this project does qualify for that infill exemption. They did submit an updated traffic study that includes the change in residential units, and it is still well below the thresholds required. So in sum, I've just gone through very quickly the entitlements required for the project. Happy to answer any questions. And then just remind you that this project does require a recommendation from the ZDRB, and then will be heard by the town council for final decision. And so we are recommending that you conduct a public hearing. Once the public hearing has been closed, discuss the project and adopt the resolution that is in your packet recommending the town council find the project exempt from CEQA under the infill exemption and conditionally approve the application for the entitlements. And those would all be subject to conditions of approval, which are also included with the projects, and of course, any additional conditions the ZDRB may recommend. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to entertain any questions and can go back to any slides if any of you would like a closer look at anything.
Thank you, Carrie. All right, are there any questions from anybody here on the dais? No? Carrie, I had a couple of questions. Are there any overhead lines on this site currently, and will those all be undergrounded?
Undergrounding is required by the town code, and I can't remember if there are any. I don't believe there are any that are not undergrounded, but they would be required to be undergrounded as part of the project.
You mentioned that there's a requirement for a sidewalk on Jefferson side, and once again, it's a sidewalk to nowhere. Is that a requirement because it's commercial, or is it because it seems at odds with what's laid out for Old Town?
Sure. Let me go back to the, and I'll actually, so it is not a requirement for the Old Town Historic. They are not required to have sidewalks, which is why it kind of ends where it does. In this case, the ADA adaptable unit would use that as an access path. Other residents could also use that as an access path to the rear of the site, as could folks choosing the retail space. So say you were parking in, the furthest away parking space as a retail user, you wouldn't need to walk through the entire parking lot. You could go along the side and along the building frontage along Jefferson to get to the commercial retail use.
Thank you.
But I do believe because the apartment 1 is slated to be an ADA adaptable apartment, for that to happen, they would need access up to the sidewalk. An ADA path cannot go behind the travel of cars. So like the 2 garages and the covered parking, you would need bollards and all sorts of stuff to be able to do an ADA pathway through the parking lot for that unit. Okay.
Thank you for clarifying all of that. You mentioned, and the plans mentioned 2 retail spaces, and I see 1 with 2 entrances.
Correct, and I will ask the applicant to review that with you. I know they have more information, but I believe it's one of those where it's 2 separate business entities, but they can flow in between the others, sort of like a marketplace style retail space.
Okay. Does that have anything to do with 2 means of egress?
That would be a question for the architect. I
Okay.
don't believe it would, because the entrances are so close together, and usually that
Yeah.
is related to a diagonal from the furthest, so from the back point up to the front of the building. So if you were required to have a second egress, for instance, it would need to be back by the dressing rooms. You can't have them right next to each other.
Yeah.
So I don't think that is why, but again, perhaps the applicant's architect can address that.
Okay. And then lastly, you mentioned, and I'm sorry, I wasn't tracking what you were saying about the owner occupancy and the concern for that occupancy to be something for other than sleeping or for living.
Sure. So that was a little bit of background on the site-specific requirements that are in both the general plan and the zoning ordinance just for these two parcels, which requires that there be two rental units, or sorry, two residential units, two second-story residential units, very specific in the zoning ordinance, included with this development. And so in going back through some of the general plan workshops, getting some background for the project as I was working on it, there was discussion about, well, if we change the zoning from two single family zoned parcels to residential commercial, we still don't want to lose the residential opportunities, the housing units from the town. And so when the property was rezoned, the general plan required that there be a minimum of two residential units, which is required, and that they couldn't necessarily just be owner occupied. And the idea was twofold in that. One is to make sure that there were rental opportunities for people within town, and that they weren't just taken up by a single property owner. And that the second was, I guess there had been some issues around the time the rezoning happened where the residential was not being rented out. Instead, it was being used by, say, the owner of the retail space for office or storage of their goods. And so they wanted to my understanding is that the reason for requiring the owner, only allowing one unit to be owner occupied and to require a use permit for that was to make sure that that wasn't the case.
And what facilitates that?
So the use permit in this case, obviously they do have, they meet the minimum of 2 units. They exceed the minimum of two second story units, and then they have the additional 2. Other than the condos, the studios would be required to be rental. Obviously, the apartment one is an affordable rental. And then the condo owner occupancy allows them to, like I said, have an owner live in the condo.
Okay, thank you.
I do have one question for Carrie. There are a lot of individual trash bins, compost bins, recycling bins. Is there any provision that those be required to be out on Humboldt Street on garbage day?
I don't believe we included that in the conditions of approval, but that is certainly something, I mean, having discussed them and read through I think actually it would be a consistency with the application as proposed. But to be clear about that, I think you could certainly request that a condition of approval requiring that for the, I guess all but the apartment 1, which is, theirs is the only trash and recycling at the north side of the building. The other residential and the commercial are all, right by the covered entry or the covered shared parking spaces. And I think you certainly could require that those be brought to Humboldt Street as a condition of approval for the project.
Okay, on one of the plans, there are a bunch of cans in the far northeast corner too.
right by, on this diagram, parking space 1?
Yes.
Okay, yes, that was in a prior, submittal. However, the town does not allow trash within setbacks. So we requested that they relocate those, which they have done. And so there is a condition of approval, because I think it's some of the civil sheets where those are still showing up over there.
Yes,
That
they
the
are.
civil sheets be updated prior to building permit to conform to the architectural drawings, which are these drawings that are before you right now.
Okay, so you're saying a condition of approval could be that all of the garbage cans, except for the ones for apartment 1, would have to
Correct.
go out on Humboldt?
Yeah.
And apartment 1 can put them out on Jefferson? Okay.
But also, I just want to confirm, the plans we have before us are accurate, correct, with regards to?
Not all of them.
No?
Not the civil plans, apparently.
Yeah, so the civil plans show everything should be the same, other than they do have the trash in the upper, by parking space number 1 in the northeast corner.
Well, they also show like a wall between the flower shop and the retail shop. They show a few different things that are not
Yeah,
the same.
yeah, thank you.
But this one we're looking at now is
Yes.
accurate? Okay.
Yes, the first 2 pages,
Okay.
3 pages. Okay, that's it for my questions.
Anybody else? No? Would, let me just check my notes here. Would the applicant like to present anything?
Good afternoon. All right. Good afternoon, Chair Miller, members of the board. My name is Kirsty Shelton, and it's my great pleasure to be here and representing the applicant on this project. I also want to thank you for being here today, and we're really looking forward to presenting. First, I'd like to introduce members of the team that are here in the audience with me. We have Kent Hallen, he's the developer. We have Adam Leitner with Borges architect for the project. Colby Hallen, the retail proprietor and the CEO of Hunter Gatherer. And Jeff Dodd with Coblin's Law Land Use Council. As you can see by this laundry list of folks, the project before you is a collaboration of many, many professionals. And for a little bit of background on myself, right out of graduate school, I came to the town of Yountville and helped assist with the bike and pedestrian plan. And one of my very first projects was to take the old fire station and turn it into a park. So I'm very intimate with the project site and the project details, and I have a deep commitment to urban design and detail and 25 years of land use planning. So I'm thrilled to be here. I think Carrie did a fabulous job, and I'd like to take the opportunity to really thank the town staff, retired Director Rogers, retired Planning Director Borba, Interim Director Ken McNabb, current Planning Director Aaron Haycock, Public Works Director John Ferns, the current Town Manager Brad Ralston, and we couldn't be here tonight without Contract Planner Carrie Svastrom. So I just really want to acknowledge that I won't go into too much detail because I thought Carrie did a great job. The only thing I wanted to highlight is, these subject parcels have been the subject of so much public conversation and land use hearings for over 10 years. In 2013, these 2 parcels were identified at housing inventory sites in the housing element to allow up to a combination of 16 units. And then in 2015, conversations started, which ultimately led to the adoption of the land use change in 2020. The applicant has been working with the town for over 3 years. I think it was 2 years the first submittal happened, and about a year ago, pretty much now, the applicant held a public meeting for the neighborhood and the community to come answer questions. And then, as you know, we were here in January on another plan, and I thought to not bore you to go through all the changes to the project because I thought Carrie did such a great job, what I really wanted to focus on is what the general plan asked out of this parcel. So the aspect of the land use that our design team and the applicant couldn't influence. So these were aspects of the general plan that the project design team have to work with. And one of those is the siting. The general plan asked for the siting to be towards Jefferson, parking in the back to be screened from view and accessed from Humboldt, for it to have a corner entrance, and to have the mixed residential and commercial. This is the only project, the only location in town that requires residential with commercial in a residential scaled commercial zoning district. It's very unique. And so so what the design team had to deal with was the 0.25 retail, which we comply with, and then coming up with a design that is residentially scaled commercial, still commercial, ideally retail, and then a combination of residential. The other requirement the general plan said was it had to be 2-story. So the 2-story element has the residential on the second floor. The architect did their best to make it look like it was a multiple different buildings, and also really emphasized the architectural variations. I already described, and I think Carrie did also, I wanted to really explain that the general plan allows up to 16 units, and you keep hearing density bonus waivers. There's no residential density request that the project's asking. The project is proposing less than a quarter of the allowed residential density for the site, and is providing a retail, local serving retail that the general plan really was looking for. And so although we talked density bonus waivers, there's no density bonus that we're requesting. The project before you, I think Carrie went into detail, it does include 2 more units. We introduced the concept in January, but to go into more detail, the original proposal that was proposed 2 years ago and submitted, the area, the massing hasn't changed. Basically, these were both covered parking spaces, and then the project before you just encloses them, not including the 2-story unit. And so I just wanted to highlight that that rear unit is the adaptable unit. There were some questions about the sidewalk, which I'll go into a little bit of detail, but it is reliant on that dedicated parking walkway so that it doesn't have to cross traffic. These are the 2 additional units on the second floor and the 1 studio. And in regard to the owner occupancy, the condos are intended to be for sale, and 1 of them will be allowed to be owner occupied. So it's kind of a unique requirement because the intention in the general plan is really to allow rental housing for workforce. And so it's really to allow 1 of the condos. So I wanted to go into a little bit more detail. The site-specific requirement is for it to be residential scaled commercial with this unique requirement, at least 2, no more than 16 residential units with the commercial core, with the commercial downstairs. And so the architect did their best by providing a lot of variation and step backs. The 2D plans before you are really hard to see what that looks like, but the front elevation is stepped back a couple feet. The corner entrance is flanked by additional recess. And then as you walk through the property, to answer your question also, Chair Miller, about the Humboldt Street, to really disencourage folks to walk there, the intention on the Jefferson elevation was very intentional to kind of go with the landscape, that the focus is for the corner of the entrance and then the flower shop, and that folks aren't encouraged to walk down there. And that was another reason why the balconies are just Juliet's, is to really protect that area and keep the focus on the front entrance. I'm going to switch a little bit. I just wanted to share with you and the public of the requirements that the general plan had on this property that the design team responded to. And then I wanted to share, I joined the team in August, and since then I have worked with the team to reach out to the community, to the direct neighbors, to the ZDRB members and really town staff include a lot of input and direction. And what you see here is the sidewalk and the fence. And sorry for the fence picture on the right being really fuzzy, but if you squint, you can see the fence extends all the way across the right-of-way. This was in direct request from the direct neighbor, was to really create a clear boundary. You may remember the original fence was not a fence, it was a wall. It's now a 6-foot wood fence, and it is extending the entire, so the sidewalk to nowhere, because Old Town Historic doesn't have sidewalks, will end and then it'll curve into the entrance for guests, etc. The other meeting with the property, direct property owner, I had 3 meetings, was to really look at the privacy of the windows. And so the original plan, you guys may remember, was 1 by 3 traditional single hung windows. In response to this request, the design team made substantial floor plan changes to accommodate these are clear story windows. So they're to provide privacy for both the occupants in the building and the neighbors. And that design theme has been carried through anywhere there is windows that abut any neighbors. In regard to the garbage cans, it is individual garbage cans. There are shared compost for everything but the retail. I can talk to the client, but I think it would be a natural thing to take out the garbage cans for the top apartment onto Jefferson and the other ones onto Humboldt. I think that would just be a natural, intuitive thing that most folks would do. And I apologize, I couldn't find that plan you talked about, so I apologize for that. My version doesn't have it, but that is correct. All the refuge storage area are in covered cabinets and away from any of the neighbors. I did want to briefly talk about the private open space because there was a public comment that may have been carried over by a concern of a party deck. And I just wanted to share the intention of what we call the requirement for private residential outdoor space. Each residence per code needs to have adjacent to it, directly accessible private open space. So a second floor unit is going to need to have that on the second floor. And the architect intentionally created these courtyards that would be provide privacy to the neighbors and privacy to the occupants. Again, not spilling over onto the Jefferson frontage to really focus the attention to the entrance. And then the private outdoor area above the porte cochere is very limited, and it's screened very intentionally with heavy landscaping, which is all part of the plan, part of the conditions of approval. And then the apartment 2 just has the direct outdoor area. I did want to say thank you in January when we came here. A lot of the direction was to provide architectural relief. It felt too massive, it felt too big, and really emphasize the reliance on hip roofs. And so the design team responded to that. I think it's pleasing. And without further ado, I really want to take a moment and just be really appreciative. Colby Hallen is the CEO of Hunter Gatherer. It's a women-owned business. It is local, and it focuses on artisanal, small batch products. And quite frankly, she just has fabulous taste. And I think this business is a perfect addition to Yountville in such a prime location. And I'd like to introduce Colby Hallen. She comes to us with multiple years in design with prestigious Napa Valley architects like the late Howard Backen and sustainability with the late Bob Massaro. And she has launched Hunter Gatherer in Yountville. It was home to North Yountville from 2016 to 2020.
Not very good with technology. I wanted to say thank you guys all so much for your time, and thank you, Carrie, for the presentation. Just wanted to quickly say, our family really views this as a unique opportunity to create something really special and create a really beautiful project in the heart of Yountville. what is currently, I find to be quite an eyesore, I think can really be something beautiful that connects that retail corridor and kind of provides that like thriving Yountville that we all are hoping to get back. As Kirsty mentioned, I did have a business in the north end of Yountville for 5 years, so I think at this point it's a pretty known quantity. Just to clarify, the addition of the flower shop has actually always been my intention, and it would not be a separate retail business. It's all under the umbrella of Hunter Gatherer. It's the same business. The idea was just to really try to identify that entrance for visual interest and breaking it up, because I know in the past that was like part of the concern of the board, was that it seemed like it was all just like one space. So we were trying to really emphasize the flower shop entrance as a separate entrance visually from the street, but it would all just be one open space. It's all going to just still be one employee. So it's not like an additional impact, an additional business. And then I know there's some of the open space, public space comments. A lot of the gardening, I just wanted to, I guess there were some of the public comments that were concerned about the impact on the environmental impact of the project. And as Kirsty mentioned, I kind of got my start here in the Napa Valley working at a sustainable design firm here. Was a lead AP on the expansion for the CIA dorm, in which everything, it was the most amazing landscape design I've ever seen, where most of it was all edible. So I was really influenced by that. And so for us, we really wanted to do like very beautiful, extensive landscaping that would also, everything, is drought tolerant, and everything's meant to be pollinator friendly. So really attracting butterflies, hummingbirds, and trying to keep our bee population healthy. And so along with sustainability, which is a passion of mine and something I think is very important, I just wanted to kind of finish by saying that we are, as our family, as developers, we are very committed to a quality project and using the best, most high-end materials, and really making sure that the project is like something really special that the entire town of Yountville could be proud of, and providing not only much needed retail, but also much needed housing. And we're just really, Hunter Gatherers, excited to hopefully be back home in Yountville soon, and we really appreciate your time. Thank you.
So with that, I just really want to thank the Helen family. As we all know, in today's world, construction costs, developing cost for retail, cost for employees, and the commitment they have in providing a very high quality project, not just in the construction, the development, but also the retail and the commitment to workforce housing. And the entire team and I are available. I will say, because of the change of application, we do have 15 letters of support, and I apologize, I didn't know if they were going to get in time, so I will be emailing them to town staff, and we'll get them on the program, but I apologize, I thought the window closed. But you've seen most of them. There's only 2 new ones, and they're from local business owners, and I just hope that we'd like to be available to respond to any questions as they come up. Thank you.
All right. Are there any questions of the applicant or the staff from us up here?
No questions.
Go ahead.
I have a question about which is the owner occupied unit? It's one of the 2 condos that's being sold off?
Yes, that's correct. And I don't know if the applicant has identified which of those, or if it matters to the ZDRB, we can ask that of them.
I guess, I mean, is that
I think it's really unique because it's the intention for rental housing specifically for this property. And the condo kind of throws clearly the condo would be intended for sale. So at this point, we're asking for one of the condos to be allowed to be owner occupied. But at the way the code is written, it is focusing on rental and for this site specific. Because I think some of the background, there were some projects that came through at the time of writing the general plan, and there were commercial projects that the board requested workforce housing. And these particular workforce housing were, instead of used as a rental for workforce housing, they were used as an extension to the commercial use permit. And so the council at that time asked for specific owner occupancy, or to ask for an allowance to have owner occupancy so that more folks would rent. Clearly, this is set out for a rental project, and the condo is specifically for an independent person. This isn't going to be an extension of commercial. So at this point, I don't think we've identified which one. I would have to consult with the applicant if they have a preference. But I think that's a little bit of background, if that's helpful.
So I'm trying to think about how we would apply this as a condition for approval, but like it's not one of the other 3 units, it's one of the 2 condominium units specifically that would be owner occupied.
Naturally, yeah.
Okay.
All of them are going to be rentals or owner occupied. It would be great if both of the condos could be owner occupied, because the intention of the code was specifically for residential units combined with a commercial use to be included in the rental market. Does that make sense? Like that's the reason why the code adopted it.
I guess it doesn't make a lot of sense because you guys know the mechanics of the relationship with the landowner and the developer and all the other parties. We don't have all of that information. So it makes sense to you, but I guess what I'm getting at is I would like to know which unit is owner occupied or which units are not going to be owner occupied.
I think at this point, the intention is for both the condominiums to be sold to an independent party, in which case they would owner occupy one of the 2. So if you could write a condition of approval that one of the second floor condominiums would be the owner occupied, that would work? The flexibility of one of the condominiums? Yeah.
Good afternoon, Commission, or Board, excuse me. Jeff Dodd on behalf of the applicant. I think in a normal situation, we have a requirement under the code, just to restate what the code says. The code says is we'd like to have 2 rental units. One of them, subject to a use permit, may be owner occupied. In terms of the 2 rental units, and I'm looking on the second floor, and maybe you could pull up your site plan. One of these units, the rental units, will be residential apartment number 3. There are 2 condo units, condo A and condo B. One of those, I don't think there's a decision yet in terms of which one of those condo units would be owner occupied or a for sale unit. But it would be one of those 2 units that would be for sale. In terms of having the flexibility, I think Christy mentioned that there's a very good chance that they all could be rental units. It's really a decision, I think, of what makes the most financial sense. And we're talking about owner occupancy, and we're talking about understanding what the code requires. My understanding is that there was a couple cases that Carrie mentioned in her staff report, was that they were using it for retail purposes, or they were not actually opening that up to the public and making sure that that residential unit was allowed for residential purposes to provide an additional housing unit. The goal here absolutely is to leave these up for housing. This is important economic aspect of the project. And to have one of them be owner occupied or a for sale unit is another critical aspect of the economics of the project.
Okay. I guess, so the additional 300 square foot unit that's going to be rentable, would be the other that would be a condo if you guys own or occupied one of the condos?
Under this condo map, there's 3 subdivisions. There's 3 areas of parcels that could be, I'm sorry to get dirt, but can be transferred
Yeah.
for buy or sale. So residential apartment 3 is part of the, I'll call the retail condo, for the lack of a commercial condo. So that is all one lot, one space, one area that is adjoining with the 2 other rental units on the ground floor and the retail space on the ground floor. So they're all occupied or owned. All of those spaces, the commercial, a mixed use space, is all owned by one owner. And that space, resident, would all be subject to rental.
Okay.
And I think to the extent that the board has any sort of concern, say, what are we trying to narrow in? I want to make sure that this is going to be used for rental purposes. If that's kind of the background of the question, we'd love to hear that, and happy to.
At one point, there was a suggestion that one of the units, one of the rental units was going to be occupied by the store manager.
I think that was the idea of having for the affordable unit, which is on the ground floor. That is a deed restricted unit, which the town allows, and there's policies, and the code speaks to renting that out to a commercial user who works on site, who works on the property. I think that is the idea, I forgot which unit number that is.
1.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Apartment number 1, unit number 1 would be idea with that could potentially be used for employee purposes. The town's policies says, hey, if you're not going to use this out for employee purposes, you have to make this open to public for affordable purposes.
Okay.
So I think maybe just to restate, or I'm making this more confusing, my reading of the town's policies is, especially in particular, I'm speaking to the affordable town policies, affordable housing policies, is we want to allow for more on-site housing for our employees, more workforce housing. And so the idea is that typically an affordable unit needs to be deed restricted to affordable households at a certain income level. In this case, it's a low income level. However, the town will allow for a commercial owner to allow an employee to live on site as well, to fulfill that requirement. I believe that employee still does. Actually, I'm confident the employee does still need to meet the affordable housing requirements in terms of income limits, and so on.
Talk about a glass ceiling.
Yes. So, but just to make that clear, and I see Director Heacock is shaking his head here. The town's policies do require that employee does
meet the low income.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those income levels required by the town.
Okay.
Hopefully, I did not make that more confusing, but I see some shaking
I'm
heads.
confused, but maybe it's just me. Okay. Anybody else?
I have a lot of things, but a simple question is, in Carrie's presentation, she mentioned that the fence around the property would be steel panel. In Kirsty, you mentioned that it would be wood. So could you clarify that, please?
I stand corrected. It's steel because it's actually on the bioretention, and that was the reason originally it was concrete, was because the bioretention is on the east side of the project, and that's where the steel fence is, and that's why it needs to be steel. So to match it on the north elevation, in the photo it looked wood, and in my haste in my presentation I said wood, but it is steel panel block.
And you haven't provided any pictures of what that would look like?
There is a picture in the master development plan. Do you want me to find it?
Sure.
And just one question I had regarding, because there was some concerns from one of the neighbors about it being a good neighbor fence. My understanding of the definition of a good neighbor fence is it looks good from both sides, and so it'd be good to see a visual of what it would look like, at least from the neighbor's perspective.
Yeah, typically a good neighbor fence is where it's also privacy from both sides. So on, it's like it overlaps like theater seating.
Yeah.
So that is typically, and then I can, page 29 of the master development plan, I can pass this around if that's helpful. Or put it up, it's 29
Yeah,
of.
I'm pulling it up now.
We don't have those.
Yeah.
Can you bring
I'm
it up
happy to
here?
pass it around.
Yeah,
Yeah. I need to-
And Christy, it's also on the screen.
it's not.
Nope.
Oh, is she sharing it now?
Oh,
Can you tell anything?
Just
It's a solid aluminum
She's
fence.
referencing.
Okay.
so
Yeah.
6
black
feet tall.
black metal horizontal.
it is intended to have the slats similar to wood, but it has to be metal because of the bioretention.
Is it only the posts that have to be metal?
I can ask the architect if he has any more information on that. I know this was something that was a design criteria when they changed from the concrete wall as a fence to the metal fence. I think it was a civil engineering thing because of the bioretention where it would be wet.
That's why I'm asking, is it just the posts that need to be metal? Could the rest of the fence be softer looking?
I don't know that answer unless anybody else does. At this point, I think it's the metal fence for durability, longevity, and for the potential of the water intrusion.
Okay.
And if I'm not mistaken, there was a note somewhere that this is a 6-foot fence, but you could add an additional 2 feet to that if that was requested by the neighbors. Is that correct?
I believe,
That's correct. You can add 2 feet of lattice with a building permit and a letter from the neighbors.
So it would have to be something that would coordinate with the metal fence. So, because I think wood lattice would look, I don't know how you'd attach it, so it would have to be integrated with the metal somehow.
I would assume some of the neighbors are here. In the 3 meetings that I had, it was requested that it was 6 feet. So that's the reason why we presented the 6 foot. If it looks like the 2 foot lattice is requested, I think we're more than happy to work with the neighbors and look at what that could look like.
And I will say you can add the lattice to a metal fence. There is actually an example here in town I've seen recently.
Okay.
I have another question for you, Kirsty. Well, it's probably for you. On the plans, you have used the term ADA adaptable. Can
Yeah.
you please explain that?
Yeah, so the code requires to have an adaptable unit, not an accessible unit, because it's not a multifamily dwelling. And adaptable means that it could be adaptable for accessibility. So it is designed universal access for both the first floor of apartment 2 and the downstairs deed restricted unit. We have a CASP expert on our team that has consulted with the building official from Yountville's team, and all of the doorways and everything meets the standards.
Okay.
Are you finished?
On that subject, but go on.
No,
But
go ahead. No, you finish.
I want to ask a question of the applicant and not their representative, Colby, if that's okay with you. And I want to start the discussion on the elephant in the room.
If I can intervene, maybe we take public comment before we.
Before that? Okay, it's a question of the applicant, so, okay. We can do that after?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Thomas, did you have a question?
Well, yeah, I mean, if this needs to happen later, I wanted to have just a quick discussion about the trees. So is that better for later, or?
I would recommend maybe we open public comment, hear what folks have to say, and then we can go back to
Okay.
offer the applicant a chance to either rebut public comments, respond to your questions, and then we can open it up for more general discussion.
Okay, great. Let's do that then. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to make a public comment? You'll both get your opportunity.
Hi, my name is Brenda Bernheim, and I'm over at 6582 Jefferson. So I'm on the little gravel driveway that goes along this very harsh black steel fence that we just saw. And I first of all just want to thank each and every one of you here for volunteering and all this time. This is a huge project. It really goes back to knowing that this is Old Town, and it's hard to believe now we're doing 2 stories. I happened to build the first ADU in town, and I had to go through a tremendous amount of time where I had to submit a 2-story. And at that time, because that's what was allowed and that's what you were supposed to do. Long story short, I ended up with a 1-story, which I was very happy about, because there was no way I was going to be able to do in 300 square feet is to do a little Jetson elevator to get up and down on a 2-story. So I have a fabulous unit that I absolutely love. With this project happening, I am so concerned about so many things that happened today, and everybody was addressing different things. Number one, the trash out on the corner of Jefferson, where our driveway kind of turns in. We already have 9 cans there. I can't imagine 12. I can't imagine where the sidewalk ends and you have those lovely, maybe, little yellow bumps going down for wheelchair access, if that needs to be, and having that noise there. That black oak tree that is there right now is absolutely beautiful and green. When I read the report of the oak and also of the black walnut, the only true reason they needed to be cut down was because they needed that to build. I read that, and that's a huge concern of mine. We also have olive trees going along our driveway that we planted, and I'm very concerned with this huge black steel fence going along there with no landscaping on the other side except for ours. What's going to happen there? We have not been addressed by the neighbors by the building and letters of trying to get the community together and talk about this project. There has been nothing that we have seen in regards to that, and that's really concerning, because you would think you'd bring all your neighbors together and try to address this before it comes to the design review or to the town council. I, being an event planner, I do a lot of kumbayas. I bring my team together before we do the next event, and I do events for 10, 20,000 people, and a lot of times they're double headers. I believe it's apartment 1, condo 1. I don't know if it's a condo. I don't know if it's an apartment. I don't know if it's for sale. Can I buy it? Is 479 square feet. That looks right over on our driveway. It's the biggest one. It has a patio. It looks right over us. That's concerning. Where are the AC units? Everybody's going to end up with an AC unit. Where are they? Is this complex going to have a generator? Where are those generators going to be? Is there one generator for the whole building? We know the power goes out quite a bit in this town. I think that needs to be addressed. I haven't heard anything about that. That's just a huge thing with me. One of my other big concerns is, who owns this property? So all of a sudden, apartment 1, apartment 2 have, a great party going on. It's 11 o'clock at night. Who am I calling? Do they have an HOA? Do they have, who's the property manager? Who do we call? Do we call the police? I mean, none of this has been addressed. And that's a huge problem with noise. And it's not just for me. It's just for, the merchants around there and the homeowners. And I look at this and I think, there are so many questions here. After the property's built, are they going to come and wash our windows like the house that was built right behind us? They came over and said, we will clean your windows for you. We've made a mess, the dust. We will put more gravel in the driveway because we realize we've ruined the gravel. None of our concerns as neighbors for this property have been addressed. And that really, it just upsets me. And I know I'm not going to repeat a lot of different things, but is there an elevator, again, in this building? If you have an ADA, somebody's going upstairs, how does this work? We all want to be good neighbors. We all try. We want to support everything we can in this town. I think the town needs to be supported right now. We have 3 vacancies of restaurants right now, and I think the more the merrier, but everybody needs to work together as a team, and we need to figure out the right solution to make this happen. And I think there's so many things here that are up for discussion, and I feel for each and every one of you here, because this is not an easy task. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Monica McCrary, and I live around the corner on Weber Avenue, so I'm not directly affected by this project. However, I walk by this property daily on my walks in and out of town. My comments today are not directed towards the board, but are directed towards the people who are putting forth this project. Walking north on Washington, this corner with our picturesque Vandeleur Park, which apparently you helped create, is the entrance to Old Town. You had the opportunity to build a building that would welcome people into this Old Town. Instead of listening to the zoning board, people that are here today because they care about this town and its character, you have proposed a mammoth building that looks like a strip mall. You've put some lipstick on that strip mall, but it's still a strip mall. This is not Napa or Redding or Santa Rosa. This is Yountville. We don't need strip malls. You have used state laws that may be appropriate for large cities to get what you want, not what the town wants. You do not care about this town, or you would listen to the board and their recommendations. You do not care about your neighbors, as 5 of them have expressed their displeasure with your project that will place a huge building abutting their property and affecting their daily lives.
Excuse me, can I ask you to speak into the mic?
Sure.
There are people out in TV land that need to hear this.
All you care about is
You
yourself.
could please face the board.
All you care about is yourself and what you want. That is sad. I'm not anti-development. My father was an architect. I was raised to appreciate a building that fits its environment. What you propose is not that. I do not know if hunter-gatherer will need local business to succeed. I do know that I will not be giving you any business, and perhaps by word of mouth, other locals will also avoid your business. You had a chance to be a welcome part of this wonderful community, but instead you've chosen to be that entitled outsider that does whatever it takes to get your way. And finally, I want to thank the ZDRB members for the time and effort you've spent trying to do what's best for this town and trying to maintain its small town character. Thank you. And sorry for my nervousness.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? All right.
Chairman, are we allowed to respond to some of these comments?
Yeah.
I would just like to make it clear, in case it hasn't been clear, that I'm not an outsider of this community. I live on the north end of town, and I have for 5 years. I own a home here that I renovated and have been very much a part of this community and have had a business here in the past. So I don't really think that the personal attacks are necessary, and I would appreciate if those were held off. Thank you.
All right. Are there any other responses to any of the points that have been made? And there may be some additional questions. Do you guys have additional questions of the applicant?
Yeah, I will.
Well,
Yep, when
Kirsty
it's at the
wants to
appropriate time.
Okay.
reply to
Kirsty?
first.
I just wanted to respond
Yeah.
to some of the comments that I heard, so if there's any others, I'm happy to. The mechanical units are in the roof. That was specifically designed to protect the neighbors' noise. And there's huge mechanical closets. One is accessed exterior for the retail, and for the residential, and then there's a retail one that's underneath the stairs. So there's been enough detail for these units. I have not heard of a generator to date. Hopefully the town will have a generator for the whole town because I know that is an issue, but I don't believe we're proposing any generators. The property manager, Colby is local. She lives here. She wants to have a business here and work during the day. I have high confidence that the renters that she attracts are not going to be people that you're going to have to call the police on, but if they do, there will be clear phone numbers and contacts. She does want to be a good neighbor. The neighbor meeting was publicly.
Who is that? Coco?
Colby.
Oh, Colby.
Will be a
Sorry.
good neighbor
Okay.
and be accountable. There was a neighbor meeting. It was noticed to all of the neighbors, the direct neighbors. Only one of them came, and he did identify himself, and that's who I worked with. He said he was a spokesperson for all 4 of those units, and the emails that I received did have their contact information. I did not follow up on that. I kind of took it as a that was the situation, and so that's the reason why I had such detailed conversations with the spokesperson. And I think because of the multiple hearings and public notices, multi-year project, I'm very accountable, I'm very approachable. I feel like, we really have been reaching out to the neighbors and attempting to work and keeping their thoughts and desires in mind to the extent that we could. Again, this is what the general plan asked for, the 2-story mixed-use project with retail on the bottom.
Does staff want to respond to any of the comments that were made?
No, I don't believe so at this time.
Okay. Did someone want to address Colby specifically?
Mackenzie, are we waiting until public comment is closed to officially?
Public comment is now closed, I believe. You can officially.
Yes, we can officially close public comment.
And now you can move into, questions specifically, but if it merges into discussion, the idea was we'd hold public comment first, so if it gravitates into discussion, you're free to do so.
We're free to do so, okay.
Okay.
With the applicants, if we would like to. Now, I would like to ask this question of Colby because I would like to hear the answer. I want to know why. I believe I actually read the description of commercial scale residential during both of the previous meetings. And we all reiterated what we wanted to see changed so that this would fit what we felt was residential scale commercial. And I would like to understand why you have chosen not to meet those standards and instead chose to go down this contentious path, adding more housing, bringing in density bonus waivers to get what you want instead of trying to fit something in Yountville. Because we've always been very willing, we want it retail, we want some residential, we want you in town, we have said that numerous times, but you're choosing to go this path instead of cooperating. And I don't understand why. If you care to let us know.
Can we go back to one of the elevations? I feel as though we have tried to take as much of the input from these hearings into the new design. We changed all the roofs to be hipped roofs. We added the setback at the front. We created the gabled roof and the setback and then hipped roofs and created the alcove in between the 2 condo units to create green space and a setback so that it would feel like it was 2 different buildings. I think one of the things that we have said in the past, and that was when everything came up about the Humboldt elevation being a separate business, it's that we're trying to create the like illusion, I guess, or the visual of a separate business to create that visual interest, because I think a lot of the feedback that we got from staff didn't seem like it fit a single use tenant. I know that in the past, specifically Kim, you have referenced Stewart, which I agree is an absolutely gorgeous property, and they did an amazing job. It's one of my favorite properties in Yountville. Unfortunately, it's a tasting room with a restaurant and outdoor seating. It's just a very different property. It's a very different business. This is not zoned to be a tasting room or a restaurant. So for a single use retail tenant, I feel like we've done as much as we can to incorporate all the feedback and make it closer to what staff was wanting without, I mean, there's no way, when we've talked about this, even if we were to enclose the flower shop and make it a different business or try to separate the buildings, that would then require additional employees. My business has always functioned with one employee at a time, 2 people when it's busy. And so by having separate spaces or creating separate, retail tenants, all you're doing is then I think adding additional staff. Then you need additional parking. The square footage of the space is actually now even smaller than my original square footage in my previous space at the north end of town. And it was just always important to me that the way that we laid things out, that it would be something that one person could staff. And so that I think is part of the disconnect. Is not that we haven't tried to take staff's input. We very much have, and have created these setbacks and the articulation, and like I said, trying to create a secondary storefront that looks and feels like it's separate, even though once you're inside, it's all one space. It's just challenging when it's a single retail tenant business. And like I said, with these, part of the reason that we were hesitant to do outdoor seating is because we felt like that would be an impact to the neighbors. And we have taken their criticism, and I understand that the neighbors would prefer for it to remain an empty lot forever. But a lot of their concerns, I believe, are just issues that come up when you have neighbors. I live on the north end of town. I live on a corner unit or a corner lot. I have neighbors that have a 2-story apartment. They look directly into my yard, my house, my everything. That's living in a small town and having neighbors. And so I don't think that we're trying to be, not concerned about the impact. I also want to be a good neighbor. I wish my neighbors could be here, but they're all working. But I definitely would never want to go out of my way to have a negative impact on the community that I consider myself a part of. We've tried to listen to their voices, listen to their concerns, but at the end of the day, I feel like we have really had some frustration, and that it feels like when we come before you guys, the things that are being brought up, it's not about, do you like the use? Do you like the design? It's much more that people just are resistant to anything being built there, let alone a 2-story building. I think Kirsty did a great job articulating kind of in her intro the criteria that we were given as far as the hidden parking field, the entrance on the corner, the parking on, coming in on Humboldt. And it's a lot of moving parts and things that we have tried to address as best that we can while providing housing as well, which we thought would be something that would be appreciated by the town, because I know for me as a business owner, it's always been extremely difficult to find quality employees because, as we all know, the cost of living here is very, very high. And so to be able to provide low-income housing and these studios that could be workforce housing for other businesses in town, I thought was something that we were really bringing to the table in addition to what we think is a very beautiful project.
Okay, thank you.
Are you able to, but in your presentation, you started with a rendering that was different from these. Can you just go to that?
This is yours, right?
So it just has more depth and detail.
So this is a screen grab from when we did the 3D modeling. So part of the reason that we didn't show much of this is because it doesn't show the gabled roof, because 3D modeling could be very pricey, so.
But it does show more depth and
Yeah,
detailing.
yes. So I don't know if you recall, we did kind of do the whole video and walk through like before, but that was with the previous roof lines. So that's the only difference here.
Yeah, so that makes sense, but I do think this is probably a more realistic representation of what is going to be there, which is more attractive to me than just the flat renderings or elevations that we
They're
have.
always hard
So,
to, feel lifelike when they're one-dimensional.
Yeah.
Does anyone-
Colby, before you step away, I have a couple of questions for you. We've been pitched that this is a women-owned business. You're the sole owner of the business.
I'm the proprietor, I'm the buyer, I'm the head of HR, I'm the merchandiser, I'm all the things. I'm also going to be the florist, so.
I know that story. So who will live in the owner-occupied unit? Are you planning to move there, or?
I already have a residence
Okay.
here, so I think a lot of what that is just having some flexibility within that, because the language, to be honest, this is not my area of expertise whatsoever. Really.
Yeah.
I'm going to be the tenant, not the owner, actually. So I think that it's just providing some flexibility in that, and that's really all I can speak to on that. Like I said, the smaller units, I'm hoping that we can have, is it apartment 1 and 3, that I would hope that we could figure it out that they both could be like,
That they both
whether
be-
they're low income or not, that they would both be workforce housing. And then the second, apartment 2, is the one that could be ADA
Okay.
adaptable.
Okay.
So
I guess some of the concern that I was trying to kind of uncover in asking the line of questions that I was asking is, I noticed that you guys don't have a bathroom in the retail space, and
we do.
it's not on the plans. Okay.
It's like kind
It's
of.
in the civil plans, but it's not on the plans that you guys
I think it's maybe just oversimplified in some of the floor
Okay.
plans that are here today, but it's kind of behind the flower shop.
Yeah.
It's right. It got moved around quite a bit when we were
It's not labeled, but. I
when
see
we
it.
were working with
That's the earlier iteration.
No, this is the most current one.
Stephen, when we were working with the CASP person trying to figure out the ADA situation, the bathroom got moved around a few times, but the bathroom would be somewhere in that area between like when you come in the corner entrance and behind the flower shop.
Okay.
Because as we've said, as a female owner, I've also often had high school age girls working there alone. So it's very important to us to have it be hidden and not
have
be
it-
accessible
and
to
have
the
it be
public, so that it's a private
on-site.
employee only.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they're just going right there. No one can access it. Always want to make sure everyone's safe. So it's kind of hidden back there, right
Okay.
behind the flower shop, I'd say
Okay.
is the easiest way to describe
That
it.
eliminates a big concern that I had, because
Okay.
I was wondering, like, how do you handle that? Do people have to walk up to Honor
Yeah.
Market, or
Well, and that,
like?
we also just wanted to make sure that we didn't have to have a public, bathroom. So like that way, if it's hidden, no one sees it. It's behind,
Right.
behind where the flower shop is, then people aren't asking to use it. My girls don't have to feel like afraid that there's somebody like lurking.
Yep.
So
I
that
get
was
it.
kind of the design behind all of that.
Okay. Thank you for that. And you typically have one other person in the store with you?
Exactly. So it's usually myself and one other person. Obviously, during the holidays or
Yeah.
things like that, we'll have more. But I try to. It's usually one person. There's some overlap between employees when it's like when it's
Okay.
busier. I always try to be
Flexible.
around, but we're not planning on having more than one full-time employee ever.
Okay.
And one other thing I just wanted to clarify is a lot of the issues as far as like landscape and the trees along Jefferson Street, a lot of that isn't overly clear because that is that PG&E easement there. So ultimately, they kind of call the shots.
Well,
So
they're big vaults there. Yeah.
which were obviously pre-existing. And
Yeah.
so I know that we, with our landscape plan, have had to like work with them. And I think the issue with any of the tree removal on that end is more that we're trying, it's like there's a transformer, there's something that is above my pay grade
Yeah.
that has to do with
Yeah.
PG&E that they might have to.
I would imagine that could impact your tree choice too. If the did
and
you change the trees, or are they the
we've
same
kind of
trees?
gone back and forth with PG&E because of that. And
Yeah.
so like initially I wanted sycamores, but their root system doesn't work with the vaults. And so
Right.
what we have chosen is in compliance with what they think will work.
Are those
there.
different than the trees that Thomas brought up at the last meeting that we were concerned about them growing to 60 feet in 10 years?
Those are, those
That's
are
the
the oaks.
scarlet oaks.
Yeah.
Which,
And to be honest, Tom,
since we're talking about
and
it,
we are, it is, like I said, it is something we're open to. We have these parameters, and I'm obviously not a landscape designer. There are the parameters with the root system. Like I said, I love a sycamore. That's what I wanted, but that didn't really work. Part of the reason we liked the scarlet oak is obviously oak trees in the area. We want to always have as many we can, and they typically are the shape of the tree. I think you can see in some of the other drawings, they're taller and narrower, so we thought that they would fit in that area better, but we are open to other things.
Well, can I just jump in?
Yeah, please,
So just
please.
a few comments, and I brought this up last time, I'm going to bring it up again. And I know this is not objective, this is subjective, so it's for your consideration.
Yeah.
But the mature height of a scarlet oak, the conservative height is 60 feet, which is twice the height of the building. And to me, that just seems so out of scale. But probably more importantly, we've just heard a lot of very vocal concern about the neighbors losing sunlight, particularly on the Jefferson side. And so the building may not change, the building height may not change, but I feel like it would be a fairly easy thing to spec a tree that is not going to go higher than the building and affect the light even more, and also be more in scale with the building and the existing street trees in Yountville. I just had a 36-inch box trees delivered to a job site today, and they drop in at a beautiful height, but they're already pretty mature trees, so they will reach a mature height within 10 to 15 years, which is pretty quick. So, and they also have a 40 to 50 foot spread, and I just feel like, for the sake of the neighbors and the light that they might lose, and the scale.
It's definitely something that we're open to other suggestions, and I think one of the reasons that we didn't think of it that way, and like I said, we'll totally take a look at it, is because of Vandeleur Park has those really tall redwoods. It seemed like the scale.
More park trees.
Totally. So
street trees.
we're very open to anything that's evergreen that works. Like I said, we do have the constraints of PG&E, so it was more trying to figure out something that worked. The root system worked, but we have, unfortunately, he couldn't be here today, but we have like a wonderful landscape architect who I'm sure could come up with some other options.
Okay.
And then I did want to say, I know the fencing along the property line has come up multiple times. I forget what it even was initially, but initially at the direction of Steve Rogers, we came in with a much higher fence because we were trying to mitigate any issues with the neighbors. And so we're fine with the height being different. We initially offered to landscape both sides of the fence. We were told they didn't want that. So we're open to the fencing and the landscaping, and that's not something that we're trying to dictate. We thought we had addressed their concerns by changing it as many times as we have, and we've always said that we're happy to landscape both sides.
And I don't want to speak for you, but I'm sure, or I hope you guys are open to continued conversations with the neighbors, because just beyond this meeting doesn't mean it's too late to have those discussions.
Yeah, and like I said, I think we were under the impression, I did, under the direction of Irene Borba, I held a town hall on site. Only one neighbor came by, and he, in that meeting, and then in the correspondence with Kirsty, with anyone else, he has multiple times said that he's the spokesperson for all of the neighbors. So I think there was maybe a misunderstanding there, whereas we thought we were talking with him, and when Kirsty had her conversations and meetings with him, that he was speaking on behalf of all of them, which is why we didn't reach back out, since he was the only one that showed up at the town hall. So I think we're open to that. Kirsty has been, like I said, thinking she was speaking with the spokesperson. So we have, like I said, we have no, it's a small community. We're not trying to be bad neighbors, and we're not part of this community as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay,
Thank you. The communication with the neighbors has come up a couple times, and there were even people that were here at the last meeting that said that they had not been reached out to when you indicated that they had been. So I think it's clear that that line of communication with neighbors needs to be more open. Okay, so I guess we're gonna discuss amongst ourselves what to do moving forward. Thank you for all of that information. Anybody want to start? I think it goes without saying, it's been mentioned that we're in a tricky position, and I want to reiterate that because at this point, given that there are housing density bonuses and waivers and concessions and everything, we've been taken out of the equation, really. We're holding this hearing because we need to be public about this, but our hands are pretty tied at this point. And so I think there are some points of discussion that we would like for you to hear, for the staff to hear, ultimately for the council to hear, that are concerns of ours, but at this point, we're not making any big decisions here. So I guess with that, I would invite you all to...
I can make a comment as well.
Please do. You always articulate it better than I do.
Oh, it's fine. No, I've just been mainly listening. I guess the word that keeps sort of revolving around my head is authenticity, right? And I think what we're here to do is find, well, what is authentically Yountville? How do we channel the authenticity of the people in the room who are here or the applicants? And the idea is that we consistently try to find a balance between development and growth and something that fits the character of the town, right? And there's the guidelines and the rules and the subjectivity. The challenge is that this project was designed and built before any of us even got into the room. When you want to talk about authenticity, I think the most authentic thing we've heard is the concerns of the neighbors, who are authentically very nervous and even scared about what's happening. I think that there are some authentic things being shared by the applicants, but also a lot of theater, right? A lot of, well, here's what we're doing, and look at all the changes we made. The issue was, from the beginning, was the positioning and the massing of the project from the beginning. So all the things and concessions, we want to be good. You can talk about that all day, but you're not really addressing the issue, which was the project was done and designed before we ever got here, and there was no, I would say, significant attempt to revisit the things that the neighbors were really concerned about. Like a lot of window dressing, a lot of changes, but I do need to call that out, even to the point where, Colby, you said, oh, well, we're adding, housing, isn't that good for the town? The only reason it was added was for the state law, right? So we just need to be really clear about what's happening here. I do think a lot of the changes that have been made throughout this very long process are good ones, right? They've addressed things. There's been, dialogue. I don't want to make this seem like a one-sided thing, but the fundamental issue with the positioning, the sizing, the massing of it, that hasn't changed. And as long as the project looks like that, you're going to get this kind of opposition and resistance. I'm not here to foment it. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just watching and I'm seeing it, right? So you can tell yourself that you've done a lot, and you have, but you're sort of, circling the issue. And I do take small objection to the idea of saying, hey, we're adding housing, isn't that great? Because the housing was added as a way to use the state density bonus to push the project through as is. So I just want to be really clear that we're not speaking out of both sides of our mouth. However, now that you've enacted the state density law, there's a lot of things you don't have to do, and you're still doing them, right? So I just want to be clear that despite certain things being fixed, attempts are being made, and it's never a completely one-sided thing. My only comment, I guess, is that a lot of things can happen in construction. We've all seen designs look a certain way and the end result look a little bit different. I would only ask that with all of the things that were put forward, if you're really committed to those, that a lot of these changes, they do manifest, because if it really looks different, remember the first version we saw was not quite so articulated, it was very plain. If we start cutting corners and it looks really different, then we've all lost here at this point, because everything that was presented as a concession just went away, and then it was really just sort of lip service to appease this group and the masses before actually ending up in the final result. But in the end of the day, we have to pass it because, like I said, the laws have been taken hold. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Michael. As always, that was well spoken.
Very well put. Yeah, thank you, Michael. I do think there are a couple changes that we can ask for that maybe you will take on. We would like to work on the behalf of the neighbors. So the fence needs to be figured out and determined. Will those olive trees survive? Will they not survive? Can they be replaced? Where exactly is the property line? What's the fate of the olive trees on the shared property with the people on Jefferson? We say we can't do anything, and we didn't when that last project that was forced into town like this over on Crossroad came. Town council got them to do some of the things that we couldn't do. So I think we can ask here and ask them to do that and bring it back in that way. I think we can ask them to maybe soften the roof line of the two-story that faces all the houses on the Jefferson Street. I would like to ask them to do something for the sake of that sweet little gray house on Humboldt that you just built a massive two-story flat wall up against, 7 feet from his house, his fence, and literally cut out his sunlight. I think that is not an unreasonable thing to ask. It is not subjective, it's objective that you decided to make that two-story right there, looming over his property. I think you could make it a bigger one-story apartment if you're trying to get to a certain square footage. I think you could set back the second story over into part of the porte cochere. I think there's a lot of ways you could pull at least the second story. The first story is behind a fence. That happens with neighbors. But I think you can pull that back a bit. And then the other thing I would like to see is one of those things that we talked about that is in residential scale commercial is pedestrian oriented. And this is not providing any of those public spaces. But in reading the plans, it says, and maybe this has changed, but in the civil plans, it calls out that the whole west-facing side of the building is obscure glass. And that is certainly not pedestrian-oriented. I would like to see that changed the majority of it changed to clear glass so that it doesn't look like a office building or a private space. It doesn't in any way look retail. So
Do you mean all the retail windows on?
it is listed as obscured glass. So those are the things I would like to see changed.
That's just the one panel that's called out.
I think it's just the window that's up against the dressing
Yes,
room,
the
right?
spandrel glass for privacy in this. It's that first bay.
It's just that one. Okay, the rest are all clear?
Trash enclosure, because it's enclosed on that.
And then
Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Sorry, it's just the one bay on the very end that is that privacy glass because,
one
can-
back, one
so
back.
that, the one that's called out is the only one. The rest are all display and storefront windows, but the trash enclosure is covered there, so it's just.
And a changing room inside, I guess, that has access to that window?
Yes, so it's, but it's just still like just that one right
Okay.
there.
They all look the same, and then it was called out as
Yeah.
spandrel, so, okay, well, that's good. I can cross that off. So I don't know how anybody feels about the wall facing the little house on Humboldt, but I think that needs to be addressed.
I mean, I think we can share our opinions on it, but it won't be any kind of condition of approval at this point.
Well, but the town council was able to ask the applicant to make changes to one of the lots over on that project, and they were willing to do that to keep it moving forward. And there isn't any reason that we can't make that our request before it goes to town council.
Yeah, I think this would probably be a good time for the attorney to chime in.
I think the key word you use there is asked. When you start requiring it as a condition of approval, because the flip side of a
I
condition
did
of
not
approval is
require it
now. Yes,
and
of course.
put it as a condition of approval. I'm asking them to be good neighbors.
I think a request is fair.
Yep.
Okay.
Does anybody agree with that?
I'm trying to figure out, when I look at this plan, I'm trying to figure out how to solve for that. And in terms of the arrangement of parking spaces, and I mean, I would love it if they would go back to the drawing board and re-examine any of this project, but since the very, very inception of this project, it has changed very little. So I'm not hopeful.
Well, the apartment number 2 is, the first floor is 335 square feet. And apartment 3 is 315. So they don't need to have a second story.
I think they do in order to have the square footage required to meet the density bonus.
That's correct.
No.
I don't know if it helps, but I'm happy to respond to what I think is
Please.
perceived. I have reached out to the owner of the Gray House in January and provided the copy of the two-story unit that you see today, and there was no response. And Carrie was on that email. So I don't know if you're speaking on behalf.
He sent a letter in.
Okay, I have not seen a letter if it was anything.
I have not even talked to him. I'm just saying,
Okay.
as a good neighbor,
Okay.
I wouldn't want this.
Again, we reached out in January, and so Carrie was on the email. You're giving me a look like I'm not being authentic. I reached out, I tried to work with him.
I'm not representing him.
Okay, well, I just wanted to let you know that we did reach out, if that was your
Representing
concern. I'm happy to address your other concerns if you would like.
Sure.
I think your questions on the olive trees and the neighbor and the fence, I think you could come up with a condition of approval that my client would be willing to work with the neighbor to come up with some language on that they have assurance on the olive trees and the fence if they want the extra 2 feet or not. I have their contacts. I'd be happy to get their contacts and work out something and provide it to staff. I think that is absolutely something that they're willing to work with and want to make sure that the olive trees are established or offer to replace once the property line is created. I don't really understand some of the comments of soften the roof line. So I don't know. I feel like this is one of the issues of objective versus subjective. It's really difficult. I do agree that the plan was pretty well baked because they came forward with a plan that they thought was directed by the council and by previous staff. And so they came up with a plan so I don't know how to soften that roof line. So at this point,
Kirsty, the hip roof that's been added to those secondary buildings, if you will, doesn't do anything to change the massing. And it's only visible in elevation. I think when you're at the base of that building, you'll never know that hip is up there. So it's a 20 whatever foot wall with a parapet on it. And then behind it that you can't see is some suggestion of a shape to the roof that probably hides the equipment that's up on that roof. But it's not really addressing the massing, which has always been the issue, always, from the very beginning. And so it's a solve that you guys did that has zero effect at addressing the problem that we have been bringing up. So, it looks pretty on the elevations. I think it looks better on the elevations. So kudos to the architect. It'll be nicer in his portfolio, but it's not going to change the streetscape.
from the neighbor.
From the neighbor or from Vandeleur Park or from driving by in Washington.
Okay, I think that's above my pay grade, so I hear it and I'll pass it on.
Okay.
I did want to respond to the pedestrian orientation, and I think it's really difficult because this particular location, I think one of the questions from the beginning was the sidewalks to nowhere. I think what Colby was explaining, it was all the electrical vaults. I know when Carrie first started, we kind of played around with how can we address the intention of this and still make it work? And it's really difficult on that Jefferson side, and given that it was Vandeleur Park across the street. So the other thing is I don't think Colby wants to encourage the loitering on Jefferson when the park's across the street. I think the pedestrian orientation for this property is unique. It is, bordering a residential neighborhood, and I think that for this particular location, it's actually quite difficult to achieve that balance.
But not impossible. I think the pedestrian orientation that's outlined in the general plan is more about drawing people into the property and not along the perimeter of the property. So whether or not that setback is 15 or 10 or 8 or whatever, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about bringing people into the property, which, the store is going to do, but it's not a pedestrian friendly public access. It's when the store is open, you can access it. So we're talking about two different things. All right.
Well,
So
I just wanted to make a comment. I might be in the minority here. I mean, when I think of the first iteration that we were presented, or at least back in June, I feel like when you look at that rendering that I had you pull back up again, that there's been huge change. It might not be to everyone's style, but it is, to me, a very different project than from when we started in June. When I look at the rendering from the general plan of the residential scale commercial concept, like the ideal concept, it's a different style. It's more farmhouse, but it's pretty bulky, and it's not. It's something that definitely changes the corner, and all this had to do was look pretty. It didn't have to fit residential in, it didn't have to fit parking in, it didn't have to fit garbage in. So in your real world, you had to achieve a lot more than this pretty rendering did. So I think you've taken it to a much better place. And again, it may not be the farmhouse style that maybe some people had envisioned and that's represented in this rendering, but I just appreciate that you have evolved it from where you started. So, as I was alluding to before, there's still opportunity to work with the neighbors and address their concerns. Maybe not completely change the building or whatever, but a lot. The first neighbor that got up and spoke, she had a pretty long list of things that I think are things that can be addressed without changing the nature of your project. So I would just encourage you to reach out to them and keep working with them.
So Thomas, you are not in the minority because Michael Zagorczyk has already said something similar, and I agree with you. Okay. This project has changed. It makes me happy that we've pushed back because what came to us originally was pretty ghastly, and now it's not as ghastly. Yeah. So, and I believe that the the image that you have there is for the east side of, the west side of Washington.
No, this was the Humboldt one.
Oh, it is? Okay. It looks different. So anyway, I think that this project is better than it was. And I know that we have to draft a recommendation. And so I wonder if anybody would like to.
I would like to get into a little bit of a discussion of the findings.
Yep.
Because you're asking us to recommend this project and pass it forward to the town council. But if I cannot make the findings that are in here, so we pass it along? Do you need examples?
No, I think the issue is probably the fact that the findings are somewhat subjective in nature, and that they're framed around, they're worded in a way that is reflecting the objective standards as opposed to the actual wording of the finding that is subjective. I don't think, and McKinsey or the town attorney can weigh in on this, but I don't believe that the findings are required, as this is a recommendation, and you guys are not actually approving the project, you're making a recommendation.
Yeah, it is a little different than when you are making the final decision on something like a minor design permit. Then you would have to, these are the conditions or the findings that need to be made for the decision-making body to render their approval, not necessary for a recommendation, but we typically package it for your consideration so we can pass on your notes when the decision-making body renders their decision. And they should frame your discussion and what you want to give feedback to the applicant on, certainly. If you do not agree a finding can be made, and you think there's direction that staff can take into consideration moving forward, we would note that on the record, but you aren't necessarily required to make those findings affirmatively to render a recommendation of approval, and if you wanted to recommend disapproval, we would not make findings at all, and you would direct staff to modify the resolution to delete findings and recommend disapproval, if that was where this headed. But yeah, the findings are great to guide your analysis. As we've touched on multiple times, this is sort of fitting a square peg into a round hole because they're subjective findings. But your code does require they be found by the decision-making body. So that's the predicament you're in.
So if we can't make the findings?
Well, the council would be the one making them affirmatively. If you have comments you want staff to convey to the council, the staff is still going to present their recommended findings to the council with your feedback.
As written in this staff report?
Potentially, but they would consider your feedback too.
Yeah, when this goes to council, there will be a section reporting back what was discussed today and what you recommended and any potential changes to the findings that you want to make.
But we don't necessarily have to adopt the motion recommending that the town council approve it. We can just file a motion that we're sharing our feedback for council's consideration. We don't have to,
A recommendation is required.
that recommend, what are we asking them to
To
do?
conditionally approve the preliminary plan and everything else that was presented to us.
Okay.
So we could discuss the objectivity of the findings that we're taking issue with, and then make a recommendation that we move the council to approve it, notwithstanding the issues that are nullified by the housing density and the density bonus laws and the housing accountability.
You can certainly add something, a disclaimer on the record that you are issuing this recommendation mindful of state law preemption.
I think that's where I think that's where we are.
Mm-hmm. But we came to your point. I mean, if you have things that you would like council to look into, that's fine. We can pass that along.
Well, I mean, there are ones that, one of the findings is that it is appropriate for the site with regard to siting and scale of buildings and privacy of the neighbors. I mean, that's so obviously not met for the little gray house. So the project be compatible with neighboring properties and developments with regard to setbacks and building heights and massing. And that little gray house is just falling in the hole here. And that's very specific, that it does not meet that.
But then there's also the condition that we can't make conditions or suggestions that are going to limit the density of the project, right?
We're not asking them
Viability
to change
or-
the density.
Or the health and human safety. I mean, you could say that house, that little gray house, is still livable. It doesn't get any light, but someone will live there, and their health will be not affected by what's happened next door. So I think that's where we're applying subjective. Those are the subjective ideas that are usurped by state law in this case. I love that it was introduced at the last meeting. It wasn't introduced, it was threatened, and then it came to be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the word threatened. Finding D, this project will not be detrimental to neighboring properties
Well, that was isn't
and
the
privacy
historic,
considerations. I mean,
on the historic register,
no,
isn't it?
no, it's not. But it will not be detrimental to neighboring properties and privacy considerations. It obviously will. And they don't seem to care, so.
Well, how is detrimental defined? Like, what is that, who makes that judgment and who makes that call about that their building is detrimental to the neighbor in the gray house
It's gonna
versus?
block out all this sun.
You know what I mean? Well, but how
It's
do
on
we
the
know
west
it's
side.
blocking out the sun unless we do maybe a study of where the sun rises, where it sets, how big is the tree in his front yard, how big is whatever tree you're taking? I mean, I think there's these other parameters that have to, if we want to get into that, there's a lot of other little caveats I think that you have to think about that probably still will not change the outcome, you know?
I think it would be good for a sun study to be included in the presentation to the council. I'd love to have gotten something like that for us. I think it's too late at this point, but I think it'd be good. I'd love to see a roof plan. I think a roof plan would be a good thing to include for the council.
Can we ask for story polls again? Is it too late for that? So that people can see, the town council can see how that affects the little gray house?
I would say there's no code requirement for story poles.
We did it before on this project, but they've changed the plan since.
Yeah.
I believe that was a discretionary
It was,
standard, though.
yeah. I think it was discretionary.
Okay.
Irene just made a decision. I mean, I agree with you, Kim. I think that all of these things are subjective. They're just not objective, and we've
And-
had them.
All we can do is ask, and they don't seem to care, sadly.
Well, I'll point out this is their third meeting, right? So this isn't the first time we've met, so.
No, or the first time we've asked for these things.
Right, so I think our path is pretty clear at this point. I mean, I think we've been here quite a while, so.
I would also interject to clarify for the record, this is the first meeting of this project.
Yeah,
First meeting,
Thank you.
it is.
exactly.
That's
yeah.
true. That's true.
I'm sorry, which?
This is the first
Because it's
because
being
it's a new
represented.
project
Oh.
than what we've had before.
Technically, yes.
Technically, yes.
For the,
Objectively, yes.
here's a question, I don't know if one of you two can answer for me. Apartment number 2, the one that is proposed to be 2-story against this little gray house, has 143 square foot of private outdoor space. Staying within that footprint, I know they're supposed to have outdoor space. Could we make it so that they made that indoor space and not make it 2-story? So that this one apartment didn't have to have outdoor space?
In terms of making it, there's case law under the density bonus law coming out of San Diego where they sort of held if they're entitled to approval under the density bonus law, you have to waive any kind of standard that would preclude construction as proposed. And that would be one of those concerns, I think.
So it's another ask.
Yes.
That would be a way to solve it, to make that apartment bigger, get your square footage, and not tower over that little house. I will ask you guys to take that into consideration for the sake of the neighbors that you want to be good neighbors to. We want you in town. We want this project. We just want it to fit with and be kind to the neighbors that it matters to.
Mm-hmm. Could they have a roof deck on that apartment? Enclose the outdoor space that exists now and then have roof access?
To get there out.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're even higher, looking into their backyard if the concern's already having height, you know what I mean? So I think that's kind of a.
Well, one's a wall and one's a low wall that blocks an outdoor space. One's a 30-foot wall, one's a 22-foot wall.
I guess
It's something to
doesn't matter. We
consider,
can only
yeah.
ask, and they're not really responding, so.
All right. So where does that leave us? Anybody want to try their hand at a
I
motion?
will.
Okay.
I make a motion to adopt resolution number 25-026, recommending the town council conditionally approve the preliminary and final master development plan, tentative parcel map, use permit of a 2-story mixed-use building, residential retail, as presented, or do I have to keep going?
That's fine.
Okay.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, passes.
Can we, all opposed, 2 abstained?
Oh, all opposed.
Two.
And just for clarification, none of that previous discussion we weren't able to make a condition, that was just a recommendation.
I believe those were suggestions and requests,
Okay.
not formal conditions. Yeah.
Right, and the staff being here and this being recorded are taking copious notes and summarizing those recommendations for the benefit of the council.
Yeah.
Yes, so, yeah, I mean, hopefully those will be taken to heart and implemented.
All right. Motion to adjourn?
Are there administrative
have any-
items?
Oh,
Board
administrative,
reports?
sorry. Any board reports, administrative items to go over? All right. Motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Okay.
glad you voted no.